People often believe that having an orchestration sounding full is always a matter of putting as many instruments in the orchestration itself, but that usually leads to chaos and not good arrangement. The real unsung heroes and fundamental instrument to have an arrangement that sounds full and amazing are actually the bass instrument. Now, with bass instruments, I mean instruments that provide the low end, those with the low timbre, such as double basses, cellos, bass trombones, tubas, shimbassi, and bassoons and contrabassoons and timpani and low percussion. Those guys, they are the foundation of all full and impressive orchestrations, like this one, for example. This orchestration sounds full for a few reasons, but most especially because of the low end. So today I want to talk to you about how to get that result, how to use low-end instruments to provide fullness into your track and why you should do that. So I'm going to try to keep this short. So I created this controller here, which lets me isolate the low instruments and the other instruments. Ideally, when you orchestrate, you might want to consider your orchestration split in two parts, the low end and the rest of the orchestration. So let me play the intro part without low end instrument. This is what it would sound like without the bass instrument. Which is very different compared to this. When we have the low end activated, you notice the orchestra sounds way more warm and full and impressive. This follows the same principle I explained in the tutorial how to make your strings sound full and warm. It's the same thing. Having a low end, which is very broad and also very simple and basic, so that it can provide the foundation for the rest of your orchestration, is the thing to do if you want your orchestra to sound full and impressive. Now, the two mistakes people do, like beginners do, is they either play the same melodies that you have on the rest of your orchestra in the low end, or they refuse to pay attention to the low end altogether. Now, you heard what it sounds like without low end, and I don't have an example of what it sounds like, what it would sound like if I were to play the melodies on the low end, but it would sound very bad. What I'm doing in the low end instead is something very basic. This. This is a very basic thing. So we only have a C note which is being doubled on different octaves and different instruments. And then we have this. And we have very, very basic bum, 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 percussive strikes on low percussion. So what we have specifically is a patch of double basses doing this. And we have this piccato note, ba-bum, that's very nice to have. Change articulations once in a while. Then we have cellos doing the same thing, but on a C4. And they're also playing this ba-ba-ba-ba sort of, run. Then we have bass trombones playing that C note too, but they are playing it on a higher octave again, just like the cellos. And I'm doing this higher octave thing because I want my bass signal to be ideally as broad as the signal of the rest of the orchestration. Because again, this is what the rest of the orchestration looks like. Very broad. So if you want your bass to make your orchestra sound full and stuff, you need to make sure that in terms of volume, it's as loud as the rest of your orchestration at least. And in terms of frequencies, of course, it needs to, be based upon the bass frequencies the most, but it also needs to be broad as the rest of your orchestration because it needs to stand out in terms of frequencies too. So I wanted to make sure that my low timbre instruments were as broad. So I layered them this way. I have the basses which are providing the most of the low end, but the cellos are also providing low end, but also a bit of the mid and high frequencies. The bass trombones are doing the mid to very high frequencies. So when I layer those three together, I get this. The low end is still the loudest frequencies though. The low range of the frequencies is still the loudest range. Then we have the percussion doing the basic rhythms. They help with the low end because they are very low, of course, and they help providing the sense of rhythm. And this also helps with transitions and stuff. So we have that. So that's the low end. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not playing complex chords because if I were, if I actually played fast notes in the bass or I played complex chords in the bass, I would get very bad results because, you know, when it comes to low end and low timbre, you tend to get with a single note a very broad frequency range. This is Metropolis Art and it has this insane frequency range, but despite of the library, you would get a very broad range. And if I were instead to play a very high note on a violin instrument, you see how thin it is in comparison? Because the highest you go in terms of pitch and timbre, the more precise your harmonics are in terms of frequencies. So when you play a low, what I'm saying is that when you play a low note on a low timbre instrument, you get a lot of harmonics, a lot of excess signal. So if I were to play chords on very low timbre, I would get an insane amount of strange overlaps in my harmonics, and that would create a low end which is not reliable at all, but rather rumbly and muddy. Same thing with the low percussion. Low percussion tend to have a very broad frequency range. So when you use low percussion, you want to use them without overdoing it, without too many fast rhythms and stuff like that. So what I'm saying though is not that you should only use one note, you know, all the time. It's not as if you only use one octave note. For example, in this part, the bass is doing something more interesting. But it is still basic compared to the rest. You know, so we have that sort of chords and stuff going on in the bass, but they are the foundation of the harmony, which provides something for the melodies and the rest of harmonies to soar on top of. So you can definitely play chords if you want in your lower end instruments, but you should still need to make sure that the highest, like the loudest frequencies in your low timbre instruments are the low ones. And I also played chords on bass trombone because the rest of the orchestration in this part was getting very big. So I needed the low end to stand out too. So I broadened it up by adding those chords. Another good example of this is my cover of Dream is Collapsing from Hans Zimmer. In that cover, there's a part with huge brass and strings that goes something like this. Well, we all know that song. Now, if you check out the low end, it does this. Basic chords and bass lines. The rest, without low end, sounds like this. Definitely not as powerful as this. Same thinking, though the low end is well distributed, it's doing basic things, just providing the harmonic foundation, and that's why it sounds amazing with the rest. So that's the whole thinking behind these instruments. Again, bass trombones, double basses, tubas, cimbassi, cellos, bassoons, contrabassoons, timpani, and low percussion. Those 9 instruments are very important to use. You shouldn't use them all together, but oh yeah, I forgot the last one, sub bass, the 10th. Now, if you want to write good orchestral music, you also need to learn not only how to write the foundation, but also how to write the rest of the orchestration. If you want to learn that, you're in luck because this channel here is full of tutorials about orchestration in 360 degrees and instrumentation to learn how to use a specific instrument and stuff like that. So you might want to subscribe to this channel, and if you want to get access to WAV files like these ones where you can analyze my orchestration, head over to my Patreon page where you will be able to download the multi-tracks of all my orchestral tracks I put out in this channel. So from now on, try to challenge yourself to use low timbre instruments in the way I showed you now, rather than using them as a layer for your melody, or rather than not using them at all. Try to apply the things you learned in this tutorial in your next track and see where it leads you. And I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye-bye.